So our next session, we're going to talk about something that is really central to what we do. You know, we've been working on Data Dictionary 2.0, and it's a big lift, but it's a massive improvement for the industry. We went through Data Dictionary 1.7, which was a huge lift, but a huge improvement for the industry. And this is really even bigger than that in terms of the benefits that we're going to give to data consumers across the industry. So we wanted people who have gone through the work, have been able to get certified and certify their customers on Data Dictionary 2.0 to talk a little bit about that experience and give you some insights in your work as you work toward 2.0 yourselves. So come on up, Al McElmon with CoreLogic.
Alrighty. So I'm calling this presentation Git-R-Done. I'm going to spare you my Larry the Cable Guy impression. I thought that might be something somewhat Texas of a saying, but it turns out he's not even close to anywhere close to Texas. So I started using this as kind of a stock slide that I just keep updating every couple years. I figured I'd bond a little bit with my realtors in the crowd and use a 10-year-old photo here. So it's my so this is my wife and I in Scotland. We're going back for our 10-year anniversary in April, so I will not see you all in Tucson, but I will be raring to go back in Louisville next fall. So as Sam mentioned, we're going to talk a little bit about Data Dictionary 2.0 and kind of what we went through to do it. A few weeks back, we were certified on Trestle, and we certified a couple of our MLSs, and we plan to have probably all of them certified before the end of the year. Once you get the work done, it's a fairly straightforward process. The hard part is really getting all your data cleaned up. So it's been out. I don't know if Josh was here, he'd be able to tell me, but I think we've been on 2.0 for over a year at this point, but most of us are just starting to come around to it, so I figured I'd throw a little bit of motivational images in here. Believe in Your Smelf is probably my favorite one that ChatGPT came up for me. Of course, the little There Is No Try from Star Wars is kind of nice, but I mostly like the one from L'Oreal, Because You're Worth It. So like I mentioned, we've been going through this for probably started our first attempt in November of last year. And I'll come back to that a little bit, but it's part of the problem that you have in doing these at scale is just the sheer amount of data and how many fields you're actually going to go through and certify. On Trestle, we have, I think, 1,700 plus fields that we've certified in our version. And it comes with a lot of extra complications that just come through with that. It's easy to go through and certify a couple hundred fields. You can isolate the specifics of the data there, but when you're going across the entire ecosystem and across all of the values in that ecosystem, it gets to be quite daunting. I think we have 85,000 plus unique values in this, and every single value and every single listing has to match compliance. So some of the challenges that we ran into, in the early days, it was around the tooling. RESO and Josh have put together some phenomenal tools that allow you to go in there and do some of the testing, make sure everything is valid, and prepare you for the certification. But in the early days, they were still evolving, and he wasn't getting a lot of feedback from the community to really start helping these tools improve. And through the course of the past year, through the effort of many of you in the room, we've really been able to give Josh some good feedback to solidify these tools, and it's made a really big difference. But I do recommend not relying on the tools alone. The RESO certification tool goes through and it acts like a user, as it should. It needs to be very strict, and it can only pull data as if it's a regular data consumer. So that can be very time consuming. So it has to go through and iterate every single listing and iterate every single expand option. And you're pulling back millions and millions of rows, but there's faster ways to do that sort of testing on your own. I put together a little Python script that I lovingly called Certify or Cry, because I cried every time it failed. And it's just comparing the data straight. We've talked about this before in the past, but we run Elastic as our backend. We hit the Elastic index, hit the lookup index, compare them as fast as possible, and just do all that testing at the actual base level without having to go through the actual certification tool. Saves us a little bit of heartache, and it hopefully saves Josh a lot of heartache for not having to run into the same problems over and over again. Design by committee is one of those good and bad things. Late in the process of data dictionary, we started running into questions around what we should certify. Should we include fields now? Should we do them later? And that committee aspect of the work groups is definitely powerful, has powerful advantages, but sometimes it leaves you in a state where you don't really know where things land. So we'll talk about that a little bit later, but it's just one of those things that you have to get involved and participate in the conversation so that you can help make a difference there. And with a challenge like this, it is tons and tons of data. I mean, I think we have somewhere in the 300s of millions of properties in our ecosystem, and you're having to handle all sorts of edge cases. Null strings, stringed nulls, empty strings. There's all sorts of things that we weren't even quite aware that were in the data set in many cases. But running through this tool, it pulls them out and it fails instantly. And that's, make you pull your hair out as you're going through it. But in the end, it's really it's best for the industry so that we really know something that's certified, it actually means something. And like I said, the rules are much, much stricter, more strict. So some of the solutions to dealing with some of these problems, over-communicate is one of the big ones. Not only just communicating with your customers and making sure that they're aware of what's going to happen, but communicating with the work groups. Data dictionary and transport and certification especially, just making sure that we're all on the same page with the changes we're going to make, especially if you're going to do something that's a little bit different than standard, to say like, hey, well, we're going to add all these fields because we feel that we need them. Well, does it have a conflicting interest or a conflicting definition on these fields? It doesn't make a whole lot of sense to go out and do all this work just to turn around and find out that you're going to have to change it. But obviously, communicate with your customers. I think while we were doing our rollout, we sent, because we roll Slack, so we'll have a lot of our customers will come into Slack and get their support there. So we wrote a little Slack bot to just send a message every couple hours saying, here's where we are, this refresh is done, this new one's coming up, these new values are changing, just to stay in constant communication. In my presentation last year, I talked about minimizing the impact and some of the strategies for doing that. But I think some of those ideas were good, but some of them kind of stink. Like they just didn't really work out. So in the end, our best way to minimize impact was touching modification timestamp on on-market listings, but everything else we just pushed through the pipeline. So we didn't actually broadcast those changes. We rely on data consumers to do reconciliation to say, hey, all these values have changed, let's do a repull, but do it on your own schedule in a way that doesn't block or doesn't have a significant impact on your business. So do it at your own pace. We definitely needed to plan to fail and recover. Our first attempt at this was in November, and we were a little overzealous. We thought we were going to be able to knock it all out at once, and then we found out that there was even some internal products that needed some changes to accommodate. There was issues in the certification process way back then that have long since resolved. But go into something of this size with the ability to roll back, have a plan to recover, and just make sure that you're not going to impact your customers. And again, work with RESO. Make sure they're aware of what you're going to be doing, and make sure that the work groups and everyone is just kind of on the same page with your approach. But be aggressive. And this is something that I've talked about on Trestle in the past, but in general, no one's going to just like, oh, I'm bored today, I want to make this update. Like, you really have to push it. You have to make sure your customers understand the value, and then just roll with it. We did have some people at the last minute who were like, I don't think I can handle it. And I'm like, you'll be okay. We'll help you. We'll make sure that you get everything you need. Everyone else is on board. Like, let's just roll. And if you run into problems, we'll help you get through it. So some of the things we learned, like I've said, it was not easy. I think I even used the words on stage last year that it would be easy, and it was definitely not easy. But it was worth it. It's made a big difference. We're glad we're past it. And going forward, this sort of changes are going to be more straightforward to handle, mostly because of the tooling that we've built to help facilitate it. But ultimately, the large number of changes are kind of behind us. Cram in as much as you can. If you're ever in a situation where you're needing to update all of your data and you have other things that you need to get done, just do it at the same time. So for us, that meant UPI. So we're UPI 2.0 certified. We rolled that out at the exact same time. So we have that available in just about every listing that we have in our system. And again, that one comes back to the work groups. We have people who are very involved in these work groups and making sure that these standards go forward and don't kind of linger, because there's been various projects throughout RESO's history that just kind of drag on and on because no one really wants to make the effort to do the implementation and to have those tough conversations. So this kind of comes back to be aggressive. Be willing to go out on a limb and be the first one to take a little bit of risk and make sure that it happens. The other one is be humble and appreciate the feedback. When you see my t-shirt tomorrow night, you might not think that I'm all that humble, but we definitely were. John Flagg from Constellation, he might be in the audience somewhere. Ton of help for us going through and doing the testing and validation, not official testing, but things that he had to deal with in his system as we were going through this update. Compass was very helpful. Boston Logic was very helpful. There's just a couple of companies that just really gave us that feedback, and if you don't listen and you just kind of sit back and, well, you'll deal with it. It not very conducive to a good relationship, and it's the people who are that proactive are finding things that everyone is going to be affected by, so take that sort of feedback very seriously. And just stay ahead of the game. That's the other big thing and a lot of these keep coming back to the same sort of theme of being involved with RESO, going to the work groups, making sure your voice is heard so that you know what's coming. There's nothing worse than having your roadmap be interrupted by something new that just got passed through the standards body because you weren't paying attention. So what's next? We talked about the last minute changes for 2.0. That's the data dictionary errata, 2.0 errata. We got all that stuff certified in all our recent versions, but older versions or older certifications will need to recertify to get this errata taken care of. But data dictionary 2.1 or 3 or 9,000 or whatever we end up calling this next version of the data dictionary is coming quick. And there's a lot of good additions, good changes that kind of start to focus a little bit more around convention. Is the ID spelled the same everywhere? Are we using comments versus remarks versus description? Like just making sure everything is more consistent over time, because things have kind of drifted over the years. So that's another big one that's coming up in this next version of Data Dictionary. Fast Track subgroup has been working very hard on value standardization, and they've been putting out some really great work. But if you feel like you're working on a platform that has good visibility into the types of data that's being used in the wild, should definitely get involved. And that kind of falls into the next one about mass value standardization. So there are some fields like city and MLS area major and subdivision, like the fields that people thought we would never be able to actually standardize are marked as enumerations. And as companies start putting these fields into their system, they're going to come back and say, RESO, we feel that this should be the list. We have it supported in X amount of markets. We want to drive this forward. Well, that means at that point, everyone else who has those fields and wants to remain compliant now has to change them to that value. So this mass standardization that's coming is another area, again, kind of repeating the same thing here, but you've got to get involved and make sure that your voice is heard in these conversations. And the other one on preparation, I would just say, write code that's flexible. Don't get married to a code base. Don't write something that you're set with for the rest of your life. You got to write code that's going to grow as your organization does and with the standard. And that's it, right with 6 seconds left to go. Thank you very much.